Hey everybody, welcome to Keeper Live. My name is Marcia Dempster. I am the Senior Director of Channel Sales at Cybersecurity. We are the leading cybersecurity solution helping MSPs generate revenue while protecting their customers from password-related cyber attacks. Very important in these weird times we're in. So since we're all working and living remotely right now, if you are watching this live, please feel free to leave us a comment. Let us know where you're watching from. We would love to hear from you and see what everybody's up to today. So the demand for well-rounded MSPs has never been greater as more and more customers are looking to our MSPs as technology subject matter experts, as well as for cybersecurity solutions as a whole. So today we are joined by our dear friend, Jennifer Bleam. She is the owner and founder of MSP Sales Revolution, and she has joined us today graciously to discuss a consultative solution selling practice and how MSPs can really be more successful while their customers are still adjusting to the realities of this remote workplace. So thank you for joining us, Jennifer. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be a lot of fun.
It always is. We appreciate your time. So first, before we jump into things, will you tell us a little bit about MSP Sales Revolution and also tell our friends at home why you call yourself the Cybersecurity Sherpa?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably one of the biggest questions that I get, other than how do I sell cybersecurity and how do I get my clients to care, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I call myself the Cybersecurity Sherpa because I've helped hundreds of MSPs figure out how to go to market with cybersecurity. So that includes packaging and pricing and marketing, positioning yourself in the marketplace. How do I sell it? And it really, figuring out this cybersecurity landscape really is like climbing a mountain. And so I talk to people who, they say I take 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. And I've been working at this for sometimes a year or 2 years, and I can't quite figure it out. And I'm the Sherpa. I'm the one that will guide you up to the top of the mountain and will avoid pitfalls. We're going to take a few shortcuts, call them a shortcut, call them a hack, whatever you want to call them. And so I literally guide my private clients all the way to the top of the mountain. They plant their flag. All of their clients have their preferred stack. It's priced correctly, and they're a thought leader in the marketplace. And I do all of that in about 8 weeks. So it's a lot of fun and a lot of work, but we get a ton done.
I believe it. And you've got your work cut out for it lately, so I'm sure you're busy every day. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yes.
So thank you for explaining that. Obviously, cybersecurity is something that we at Keeper are completely fanatical about. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about how you view MSPs and how they can really leverage this current cybersecurity trend that we're seeing to improve their overall sales. So let's jump in if you don't mind. What would you say the benefit is of a consultative solution selling motion versus just selling, one solution at a time?
So when you sell one solution at a time, there's 2 problems with that. Number one, you are selling a widget, you are selling a product to, or a solution or a service to typically a small business owner who generally does not like technology. So there's already a mismatch because you're very excited about the machine learning or the math learning or the AI or whatever your sales rep talked to you about. And it is exciting. It's great technology. It's a lot of fun to talk about. But then when you talk to your client as if they are technical, you're completely going to lose them in the sales process. The other reason I don't like to sell one solution at a time is that most MSPs are stacking on top of their managed services. And when they build a advanced security solution, they're selling anywhere from 6, sometimes as high as 12 additional solutions. Well, if you don't sell a package and you just go in and every quarter you are selling a new solution, first of all, you're taking a chance on your client saying no. But if they say yes, then in 6 to 12 quarters, which I'm not even going to try to do that math, but it's a year and a half, maybe 4 years, 3 years, something like that. Your clients now finally have the solutions that they should have had in Q1 of 2021. And so by virtue of selling it one solution at a time, your clients will be always behind the curve. You're devaluing what you are offering as a package, and you're just not positioning yourself well. The other reason that I don't like to sell technology is that you should always be building the value of what you're doing by talking about business implications. And we'll probably talk about that throughout, because that's one of the things that I talk about quite a bit is talking about the business implications, because that is the value to your client. It's not math learning and machine learning and all of the buzz about technology. It's about helping their business. And so that's why I love the consultative approach.
Yeah, well said. And I think that's completely true, especially in our current landscape. No one's really buying one piece at a time. If you're really trying to tackle cybersecurity, you better do it all at once, and you better do it right.
Yes.
So I'm glad you said that. And obviously, Keeper's an easy fit into that stack. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. So next question, MSPs are successful because their clients trust them to be those subject matter experts in whatever field they're focusing on. So in this case, we're obviously talking cybersecurity today. How would you say that MSPs can really increase their sales by increasing their knowledge-based trust? And how do you advise your MSPs to really build that trust?
So again, two different ways. The first are to use events. Normally I would say seminars. Right now I will say webinars, but it seems to be the X factor, that common denominator that makes MSPs successful. So when you execute a webinar correctly, then you now, not only do you have a piece of content that you can repurpose probably 6 or 8 different ways, but for the people that are in that audience live or who watch the recording, you are showing up as a subject matter expert. You are now a cybersecurity expert simply because you put on a cybersecurity related webinar. Now, that's not a marketing system. It should certainly be part of an overall system, but that's one of the best ways to show up in your community as a subject matter expert. The other thing that I always preach is ongoing education. And that can be blog posts, it can be articles, it can be going live on social media. And almost every week, I stumble across an article from a large publication that is already formatted in such a way that you get 3 nice, neat bullet points or 4 steps to whatever. And that's ready-made content that you can repurpose. So either share that actual article from Inc. magazine or Forbes, or that someone shared on LinkedIn. So you can share that article directly, or you go live, you reference the article, and those 3 points or 4 points that are in the article become the 3 or 4 talking points that you talk about in your live, or you break them up into a blog post and you rewrite that content. I'm not suggesting that you steal it, but you can certainly steal the concept of those 4 bullet points, write your own flavor, and now half of the work, if not more, is already done for you. So that ongoing education to let people know, okay, when you're coming in as a salesperson, you're not just trying to sell me smoke and mirrors. This is a real problem that we really need a solution to. Yeah,
that's so true. Well said. So would you say, with data breaches on the rise, as you mentioned, it's so critical to stay in front of that knowledge, and things are changing every day. So we're seeing data breaches in the news. It's happening all the time. So it seems logical that an MSSP is riskier, and yet we're seeing some MSPs that are still transitioning to kind of include security services in their tech stack. Why and how are MSPs making that switch now?
So I'm a little bit contrarian when it comes to this topic. I'm actually contrarian when it comes to quite a few topics. And I always wonder, who has this magical bucket of S's that you reach this threshold, this pinnacle, and someone pulls out the S and says, congratulations, you're now an MSSP. I would argue that most small businesses don't even know what an MSP is, let alone go, oh, you have 2 S's in your name. You must really know what you're talking about. So now, should MSPs become more security conscious, security aware, arguably even security first? Yes, I would say absolutely. But this grand ambition to become an MSSP, it's not defined, and your clients probably don't know what it means, and they don't care. Now, why should MSPs become more security conscious and start to think about security, even though it seems on the surface to increase their liability? Well, I would say that if you don't start to pay attention to security more, you've already absorbed that liability. Like, the liability is there. If all you are doing is like some standard antivirus and maybe a Linksys router, then the liability is on your shoulders, whether you realize it or not. And so you need to be aware of that. And then I would strongly encourage you to talk to some MSPs that had a breach or a hack or a number of clients that went through a ransomware attack. I don't just mean one or two, but where their whole base had a ransomware attack. And once you talk to them, you're going to realize that you probably simply dodged a bullet. You are just as likely for it to happen to them or to yourselves as they were to have it happen to them. You just happen to be lucky this time. And so the liability is there, and certainly we can talk about insurance, and yes, have that, but making sure that you're aware of what those threats are, very, very important.
Absolutely. And just, to go back to what you said before, again, with that knowledge base, like, you have to stay on top of these things, and you have to figure out which solutions you're going to try to position to your customer base, and you better understand it, and it better be easy to deploy. Obviously, we here at Keeper know that our MSP offering is very easy to deploy. It's completely adoptable. So that's something that we really believe in too. So I agree with you there. I love what you said about easy to deploy, because we've probably all been laughing at the Zoom video of the man with the cat filter over his face, right? And like, I cringed because I could picture so many MSPs having to patiently on the outside say, now click the little arrow, and patiently try to walk the user through figuring out something that is to us as simple as Zoom. But it isn't simple to the end user. It took my husband 90 minutes to walk my father through setting up his Zoom account so that they could access their Sunday school class on a Sunday. And then after 90 minutes, my dad said, okay, hold on. Can you walk me through it on my computer? That was my Kindle. And my husband was like, oh my word, are you kidding me? And so having that user interface that is super simple, like even for the most technology averse, shall we say, so important. That's one of the things that I love about Keeper when I saw how simple your interface was. So I just wanted to add that because the cat video is all the rage right now. I mean, we were talking about it today. We're in Chicago, so we were mentioning that today, just how it's so funny that something to you and I and most of the people watching this, Zoom is so easy to use, but it might not be for everyone. So it's so critical, especially for those end user customers, that you understand the product so you can explain it to them and show them how to use it. And once they pick it up, then they've got it. But it takes some time. So we try to make it as easy as possible. And thankfully we have folks like you in our MSP community that understand it and can help fill in the gaps as needed. So we appreciate that.
Of course.
So how do you suggest, when you're talking to MSPs, how do you suggest that they approach the broader cybersecurity conversation as a whole?
So I hinted at this earlier. I like to talk about the business implications. And so taking it out of the technology world and into the business world, most MSPs that I talk to, it's owner-led sales, right? It's business owner to business owner. So remember, as the salesperson, that who you're talking to is another person in the company, but keep in mind what their role is. And so if you're talking to the CEO, that person has different cares, worries, and concerns than if you're talking to the director of ops, who is different than the CFO. And so it's really easy for us to throw out semi-technical terms like downtime, and we know what that means. But every time you say, okay, the implication is downtime, well, what's the implication of that? So I would say the implication of that to the CFO is you can't collect funds, you can't bill for your time. You might not even be able to track your time. And so those are the business implications for the CFO. The CEO might care about it in the case of a breach or some other type of a security issue. he or she is going to care about their intellectual property, perhaps their brand, the damage to their brand, the who's going to interface with the clients and explain exactly what happens there. Usually the CEO wants to own either all of the client relationships or at least their top 20, 30%. And so I encourage questions like how and what. So how are you going to handle, number one, finding a list of those top 20 clients? Would you have them offline somewhere? Because if you are down, again, that proverbial downtime, if you're down, you can't get to that data. You can't pull a spreadsheet. You can't, pull up your email. You can't look at your proposal system. You have no access to any of that. And I liken it to when electricity goes out. Like we've all experienced, we lose power and yet we walk into the kitchen and flip the light switch. Like it's just habit, right? Like we're just going to flip the light switch. It's like, hello, there's no electricity. And so you have to walk your clients through. When I say downtime, you don't have access to your data. So how are you going to pull that data? Where are you going to find it? Who's going to own that conversation? Mr. CEO or Mrs. CEO, if you are going to own that conversation and you want to dial all of those clients, you're probably working into the evening. Tell me what that conversation is going to look like when you have to tell your spouse, I'm not going to be home for dinner for the next week because I've got a major issue that I'm dealing with. And all of a sudden you've brought it out of this theoretical, like, oh, I could be down, to a very practical, here's how it's going to impact my life as the CEO, my life as the CFO. The ops managers are the best because the ops managers, they typically are very detail oriented. And as soon as you say you don't have internet, you don't have CRM, their mind is creating the problem as big as it actually is because they're running through just automatically because of how they're wired. They run through the standard operating procedures and they're saying, we can't get anything done. Like they start to realize very quickly what a crisis it is. So you are essentially selling to each role in the company and explaining to them what the implications are to them.
Yep. Well said. It's really getting it down to that granular level and the impact that it can have on somebody's everyday life, not just everybody at once, but it's how is it impacting you as a business leader, as a C-suite person, just, that broader domino effect that it's going to have if there's any kind of breach or any kind of downtime or anything like that. It's a scary thing.
It really is. And what I always encourage people to do, in addition to talking to your colleagues and finding out what it was like in real life, every once in a while, probably every third or fourth big breach that hits the news, it goes through this cycle. And so it's always, oh, we had a breach, but maybe a few folders or files were affected, but no data. It's okay. And then a week or so later, it's like, oh, it was worse than we thought, but still not horrible. And if you wait through the news cycle, you will start to see the real world stories kind of bubble up to the top. And that's what you want to pay attention to. Those are the ones that are great to share in marketing because it's Sally in accounting saying, I didn't realize how contingent we were on being able to access our data in the cloud. I never really thought about it. And now we can't bill and we can't track our time and we can't, we showed up late to court because we couldn't remember what time our case was and we couldn't respond to an RFP. And so starting to file those things away in your own head as a salesperson, very important so that you can pull them out when you're in that sales call. But then also sharing those either as pre-sales literature or on your social media. Those are great fodder. It's great fodder to simply share and say, this is why I keep talking about cybersecurity, because I can't let this happen to you. I care about your company.
That's a great way to look at it. And, we operate very much the same here. People don't realize, it's a stat that we here at Keeper all know inside and out, but 81% of breaches happen due to a weak password. So you can't tell me that your employees aren't using, their network password is the same thing as their Facebook password. Yes. That is a scary thing. So if you don't have your eye on that and a breach happens, it could be due to somebody's LinkedIn password, not them trying to access a server or something on your network, but it can be just as detrimental. And that's kind of the tip of the spear of cybersecurity. Obviously, it's a big conversation, but if you're securing those passwords up front, you're already taking a lot of the load off and making your life a little bit easier. As a business leader, as a seller, as an accounting person, like you mentioned, like, God help you if you're the one that like all your financials get leaked. And those are the horror stories that we hear about all the time. And we use them in our day-to-day conversations, but you certainly don't want to be one of those conversations.
Agreed.
It's scary. So sorry, we kind of went off topic there. I love getting your thoughts on these things on the fly. So a few years ago, unified communications as a service was definitely thought of as one of the biggest sales opportunities for MSPs. Then again, at the beginning of this pandemic, we really saw another huge surge in the need for those UCaaS companies as, work was shifting to working from home, working remotely, not as much travel. So now we're seeing those trends moving towards security as a service, which comes as no surprise to you or I. But, of course, we're happy to see that it's becoming a big topic that we can talk about. Are you, on your side with MSPs, seeing that big uptick in security services being discussed in your day-to-day?
It's so interesting. I'm definitely seeing that. And I think part of what we're seeing, it's a great benefit. It's a great benefit. Downtime, and it could impact your company. One of the big things I hear is, my clients don't want to buy security until something happens, right? They kind of bury their head in the sand. They hope for the best. They don't plan for the worst. And so what is happening because of the pandemic is that downtime has been forced upon these companies, not because of a cyber incident, but simply because you're not allowed to work right now and you've got to hurry up and get home. And maybe you didn't have a way to work remotely. And so there were, 2-3 days of downtime and you limped along and maybe you emailed files back and forth. And we were back in like the dark ages of having to attach documents, right? Like horror of horrors. And so I think people have started to realize, wait a second, this is not like a someday thing that I could be down and I need to be able to work from elsewhere at a moment's notice. Maybe this is what the MSP meant when he and she kept telling me about downtime. Mm-hmm. And so there has been a connection to the cybersecurity conversation. And the other thing I think people are realizing, probably by looking at themselves in the mirror, is knowing, hey, I'm working from my dining room table and my kid is behind me doing school and the cat is walking across my keyboard. My boss is breathing down my neck and I still got to get to inbox 0 by the end of the day. And I'm super focused just on cranking through the emails. Mm-hmm. And I'm not necessarily focused on what's happening. I don't have my little password on my Post-it note under my keyboard like I shouldn't do, but I often do. And so all of a sudden there's been this convergence and this awareness that cybersecurity is really needed. And I would argue even more so because people are at home.
100%. And especially, there's so many tools readily available in our platform. I mean, we have a tool called Breach Watch that kind of monitors your password usage for you, can keep an eye on what's happening. It scans the dark web, make sure you're not going to be breached. But that can apply to your personal life and it can also apply to your professional life. And now, like you mentioned, those two things are quickly becoming interchangeable. So you're working from your dining room table and you're talking to your boss, but also you might be teaching your child school at the same time, which
indeed
I have a lot of respect for those people because I couldn't do it. But it's exactly what you said. There's a lot of crossover. And if your work isn't secure, and if, like you mentioned, if you're emailing documents back and forth, horror of horrors for sure, there is a way better way to securely share those files.
And it really is a shift because until a year or so ago, yes, people worked remotely here and there, but for the most part, maybe 2 years ago, they were really behind the firewall. And so the firewall did the lion's share of security, even though there were more layers that should have been in place. There was some reliance. It was a bit of the little security blanket, right?
Yeah.
Security blanket, I'm relying on the firewall. Well, it's a good thing you had a good firewall because perhaps the rest of your stack was subpar, but the firewall was doing a great job. That's not the case anymore. Most of us are not working behind our business's firewalls. So that's a huge challenge.
Absolutely. I mean, we're lucky, we're in the technology world and, we're healthy and have jobs and we're great. And even during this pandemic, we're still seeing a lot of people starting their own businesses. So I'm sure you're talking to some of those folks, those end user customers. How would you say that your MSPs can gain some of that market share from these emerging businesses?
So again, one of those contrarian topics, but I would highly recommend that you at least consider, if you're an MSP listening, that you consider putting together a micro business plan. So put together Keeper, an endpoint protection solution, and maybe a local backup, perhaps an encryption tool, like just some basics, because most of the companies that I talk to are saying, I want to market to those that have 10 to 100 computers, and the sweet spot being probably 20, 25. If you get 100 seat deal, that's a whale, but 10 seems to be the bare minimum. And I think it's because of profitability, and I want a deal that's worth at least $1,000. And in order to get to my MRR goals, it's fewer sales. And I recognize all that. But I would encourage you to put together a micro deal, something that's hands off. Make it profitable. I mean, anything that you sell in your business, I want you to sell it profitably. But there are plenty of micro businesses around that are willing to pay for top notch or even your micro plan, but they don't meet the 10 user minimum. So I'm an ideal case in point. I am a single solo entrepreneur and I have one virtual assistant. And there's not an MSP in my neighborhood except for my wonderful husband who would sell me a deal. And so I guarantee you there's business in your area of those 1-person shops, 5-people shop, 7-person shop. And you can say it's a 5-person shop. I would bet if you landed 4 5-person companies, one of those is going to grow and probably skyrocket over the next handful of years. Because if they can make it over the next year, they're golden, and they have the drive and they have a growth mentality. So think outside the box just a little bit, because you're right. This is because so many people were forced to stay at home. It's like, well, I may as well chase my dream. I don't have anything else to do, which is phenomenal. But I think there's a way to capitalize on that with that micro plan.
Absolutely. And that's a great suggestion. So many MSPs that we know might be a small operation, but you don't really know the reach that they have or those customers that they're touching and the amount of users. And as long as you're building, like you mentioned, that micro plan to really have a compact, easy to discuss solution, that's going to get you where you need to be with all those business parameters that you mentioned. So that's a really good suggestion. I like that. So I know we mentioned this earlier, but I'm wondering if you agree in your daily conversations that password security management really is the easiest place to start in that broader cybersecurity strategy. We mentioned the data breaches happen because of weak passwords. It's over 80%. We see it all the time. What are your thoughts around that? And do you agree that's kind of like a gateway to get into those security conversations?
So I would not recommend that you sell it as a standalone solution, but it is a great way to start your sales process because it is simple. It's easy to understand, and you can have that conversation around, we all know we're not supposed to reuse passwords, but we all probably know at least one person, wink, wink, that reuses passwords. Well, let me explain to you why that's bad, and let me explain what could happen to your company. Again, we're circling back to business implications if that password leaked. And then, of course, you can talk about the password being pinned to the wall or underneath the keyboard or posted to the monitor, the side of the monitor, and why that's a bad idea. But it's a very concrete, cybersecurity concept that the average user totally understands, because most of them do reuse passwords because they don't have a password management tool, or they try to get clever and add a one at the end. Like the hackers don't know that happens, and like the brute force tools don't try that automatically. And you can read the stats of how many people have password as their password, like they're being clever. And I mean, we laugh, right? But it's an easy way to educate the user and say, yeah, you'd be surprised how many people would have password as their password, and probably not any of your employees. But I would wager a guess that some of them are reusing passwords. You think that's fair? There's at least one or two employees that are reusing passwords. And if you're talking to a halfway educated person, which hopefully you are, they're going to say, I bet it's more than one or two. You're probably right. Well, let me explain to you what could happen because of this craziness with reusing passwords. And then you're right back into the business implications problem. So yes, it's a great gateway into that cybersecurity conversation.
Love that. Well said. What would you say is the number one cybersecurity mistake that you are seeing MSPs making as it pertains to their business currently?
So if you have not changed anything about your offering or about your policies or about the way that you do business for your clients, if you haven't changed anything in a year and a half, then you're behind the times. Because we all talk about how the hackers aren't these greasy-haired kids in their parents' basements, just trying to hack away and they can barely type. We know that it's the nation states. We know it's the bad actors are businesses, and they're extremely savvy, and they're split testing, and they're iterating, and they're improving, and they are better today than they were a year and a half ago. And so if you have not bettered yourself in the last year and a half, you are behind. You simply are. And I would encourage you to have that same conversation with your clients, because they probably picture in their head the movies, right? It's that kid in the garage going, oh, let me see if I can get into the CIA. That's not what's really happening. I mean, certainly there's probably some of that happening, but that's not the vast majority of what your clients need to worry about. So again, you're educating, you're explaining that that's not who we're protecting against. There's plenty of ways that you can explain. These are, you go online and you buy a bad thing, you buy ransomware, and that ransomware that you buy, if you're the bad guy, is guaranteed to work or your money back. Like these are, there's a customer support line. These are businesses that you are fighting, and you need to look at them almost like you would look at competition. And you would never say, oh, let's just take a year and a half off and we don't need to keep up with the competition. Well, then you can't take a year and a half off of cybersecurity and say, oh, we'll just catch up next year. It doesn't work that way.
Right. And like you mentioned, we're seeing these different things every day. And I think a great way to look at hacking and cybercrime is that you should view it like that is a corporation. That isn't just one person. These organizations are smart, they're fast, and they're incredibly savvy. So you've got to be open to having those conversations and stay ahead of it. So
totally agree.
Great way to look at it. I love that. What do you think is going to be the next big solution for MSPs to add to their tech stacks?
So I think two big things are coming, and I don't know that these are necessarily things to add to the tech stack, but they're things to start thinking about as an MSP or MSSP. If you like that invisible S, you can use it. I won't think any less of you. But one is CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model. It is, I was going to say it's coming. It's not coming. It's here. And that is something that if you have clients that are in the supply chain, they're already probably asking you for help. You need to become an expert in that. It's very lucrative. And I believe it's going to be impacting every MSP probably in the next 2 or 3 years, whether it's with requirements on us as MSPs or it's requirements on any business that does has contracts with the government, regardless of whether they're in the supply chain or not. But CMMC is here. I think that's big. The other one, this one's a little fuzzier, is artificial intelligence. I just stumbled across an AI tool that literally, if I feed it 2 or 3 lines of text, it will create blog posts, Facebook posts, LinkedIn ads.
Wow.
It will, it's amazing. And it is very good. a couple little minor changes. Like when I fed some things in, it said something like, and you must protect your enterprise against hackers, breaches, and ransomware attacks. Well, I wouldn't say enterprise, right? So but I would say it is 90% there. So I'm not sure exactly how that's going to be baked into a stack or into the MSP's model, but there are definitely some applications there. I'm just not sure exactly what they are.
Yeah, and that stuff is so cool, and it's changing all the time, and I love that.
It's amazing.
Great. Yeah, like it's so great to see technology like that is evolving so quickly. I know on our side, like we add stuff to our platform every day. There's different threats, there's different compliances. I mean, if you're a bank, like you mentioned, if you're in supply chain, logistics, healthcare, like there's so much that you have to think about. So it is interesting how quickly the technology can adapt to really help those customers.
Yeah, I keep feeling like there must be a way to, like I've seen a couple of people do like a chat bot or something on their website. I can't help but wonder if it's more of almost a live troubleshooting where somebody calls in and says, I'm having trouble printing. And we're like, oh, let me connect you to Bob. And Bob just happens to be a robot, right? I mean, Are we there today? No, but we are awfully close.
We're close. Yeah. I mean, in our platform, we have a way that it assists you with changing your password. So instead of having to come up with, okay, I need it to be 20 characters and it needs to have a hash sign and a $sign and numbers, like we will do that for you. It'll save it. It'll auto-populate it. It's encrypted. Like then you don't have to worry about it.
Right.
It's safe. But yeah, I think that all of that stuff is coming such a long way and it's changing every day. So it's like you mentioned, if people aren't having these conversations on the regular, I mean, can you imagine going a year and not changing something in your tech stack?
No,
of course not.
I hope
crazy. Yeah, like
I can imagine it, but I don't want to imagine it.
Like I never want to deal with it. So finally, last question. This is very tough for you, Jennifer. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, how would they do so?
I really like tough questions like that. Okay. So the first way, I have actually taken everything that I have learned and I've distilled it down into a 30-day email series. And you don't get an email every day. It's probably 23 out of 30 days. And if you go out to cybersecurityroadmap.com, you can download that. It's completely free. And people sometimes say, well, why in the world would you want to give that away? And it's simply because I truly want the MSP community to become cybersecurity experts and to protect themselves. And I also know that some small percentage of the people will take a look at the 30 days and say, I'd rather work with Jennifer. And so download it. If you're interested in working with me, reach out to me. Happy to chat. And then I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. I know this is streaming on LinkedIn right now. So if you search for either Jennifer Bleam or you search for Sherpa, I actually come up if you search for Sherpa, so that's probably easier to spell than my last name. And those are the best couple of ways to reach out to me. And then if you do connect, I'll invite you to join my Facebook group. It's open. It's not open to the public because I do screen to make sure you're a real person and that you're not a hacker. But it is open to you to join. I'd be happy to have you there as well.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Well, we obviously appreciate your knowledge. As you know, the MSP community is pretty tight-knit. You know a ton of those amazing folks. We have a whole team behind us to support MSPs on our side. We love working with you, and we always appreciate your time, and we love chatting with you.
Likewise. I appreciate you bringing me on. This was a ton of fun.
Of course. Anytime. I'd have you on here every day if we could. But you're busy. We're busy. You know how it is.
I do.
So thank you, everybody, for attending today's Keeper Live on our MSP Consultative Solution Selling in a Remote Marketplace discussion. To learn more about how you can generate revenue and add a password management platform as a service to your current tech stack, with Keeper MSP, please visit keepersecurity.com/MSP. Thank you again, Jennifer, and we will see you guys next time. Have a great day.